In 1986, the world was already in love with Molly Ringwald. She had starred in 16 Candles in 1984 at the age of 16. She was in The Breakfast Club in 1985 as the princess who gives away her diamond stud. And then in 1986, at the ripe age of 18, she starred in Pretty in Pink, her third film in collaboration with John Hughes. These movies have become part of the Brat Pack canon, and all three are considered cult classics, racism, homophobia, and weird class politics aside. These movies were hugely culturally significant and financially successful as well. They are lauded as some of the first movies, quote-unquote, made for teenagers, which is, of course, a complicated and reductive claim, and yet has some truth to it as well. After-school specials were being made in abundance at the time, and these John Hughes films seem in direct opposition, not necessarily to the content of the after-school specials, but at least to the tone of them. Pretty in Pink is about a working-class girl navigating the social stratification of her mostly incredibly affluent high school. According to Ringwald, a large part of the reason that this film is special is because, quote, no one in Hollywood was writing about the minutiae of high school, and certainly not from a female point of view. That female point of view is Andy's, who works at a record store, does well in school, and can turn thrift store finds into distinct handmade looks that are gold.
Hey, turn around.
What?
You know what? Turn around, let me see this outfit. Is this your latest creation?
Uh-huh. Is it?
God, what did that cost you?
Oh, about $15 for the shoes, secondhand, and I made the rest.
She lives with her never fully employed and clearly depressed dad. Her mom left a few years ago, and while Andy has bounced back from this, her father has not. She has two friends. One is Iona, an older friend, Andy's boss at the record store. Iona's looks change with the weather, but she is steadfast in her love for Andy and her pursuit of love. And then there's Duckie, Andy's best friend / annoying little brother type / stalker.
I love this woman and I have to tell her. And if she laughs, she laughs. And if she doesn't love me, she doesn't love me. But if I don't find out.
At Andy and Duckie's high school, there are poor punks and rich preps. And Duckie and Andy are on the wrong side of that divide. On the right side is Steph, played by James Spader, a rich kid who punishes Andy brutally for rejecting his propositions, and whose sole purpose seems to be being a dick.
You know, I've been out with a lot of girls at this school. I don't see what makes you so different.
Perhaps my taste.
But representing the Richies, there's also Blaine, best friend of Steph and love interest of Andy, played by a beautiful Andrew McCarthy. Blaine has a keen interest in Andy, and it is incredibly mutual. They are super into each other and start trying to date. But it's hard, because there's almost nowhere for them to go. They try hanging out with his friends, and it's awful. They try hanging out with her friends, and it doesn't work. She doesn't want him to see her house. He knows his parents won't approve of her. Their class difference makes it impossible for them to fit anywhere. In a moment of optimism, Blaine asks Andy to the prom.
I know the prom's kind of lame, so if you don't want to go, it's really no big deal.
Prompting one of the greatest moments of a rom-com cliche. Andy runs into the house, leans up against the inside of the door, and screams with delight. Duckie starts to unravel at the news that Andy and Blaine seem to really be dating and lashes out at Andy for abandoning him.
So when you get your heart splattered all over hell and you're feeling really low and dirty, don't look to me to help pump you back up, cause maybe for the first time in your life I won't be there.
Steph mocks Blaine for slumming it.
You know, if you want your little piece of low-grade ass, fine, take it, you know. But if you do, you're not going to have a friend.
Andy can take the heat, but Blaine can't. He stops calling Andy or calling her back. He starts pretending he doesn't see her in the parking lot at school. She confronts him in the hall, screaming at him, and finally gets him to admit that he isn't taking her to the prom after all.
You're ashamed to be seen with me.
I am
You're
not.
ashamed to go out with me. You're afraid. You're terrified that your goddamn rich friends won't approve.
Steph and Duckie come to blows in a proximate fight on behalf of their friends. Andy is heartbroken. She goes over to Iona, who is nearly unrecognizable. Iona has fallen in love with someone who definitely voted for Reagan, and so she has changed her whole personality for love. Here's Katrina Giltra, author of the book Hollywood Romantic Comedy.
Rewatching it, I thought there's sort of conforming thing going on of who fits in where and who doesn't fit in there. But the bit that really jarred for me was actually Iona's transformation as somebody that was so quirky and so fun and ran a record shop to have turned into a sort of much more conventional middle-aged mom figure for her to fall in love. Actually, John Hughes movies look like they're about being eccentric and being different and being individual. But actually, to reach their resolution, they're very often about, to be happy, you have to calm down and fit in.
Except Andy. Andy asks Iona for Iona's old prom dress and goes to the prom anyway, without a makeover. She reworks Iona's old prom dress to her style and goes to the prom with Duckie. In the original ending of the movie, Duckie and Andy got together. But audiences booed. John Hughes rewrote the ending, and Andrew McCarthy was flown in from New York City to reshoot the prom sequence. Andy and Duckie walk into the ballroom hand in hand and start to talk about dancing, but as friends. Blaine sees Andy across the room and is making his way to her when Steph walks up to Blaine to talk shit about Andy. And Blaine finally stands up to Steph.
That's it, Steph. She thinks you're shit. And deep down, you know she's right.
Blaine shakes Duckie's hand, and then he looks at Andy like she's clear water after a day in the desert that he dares not drink, and gives one of the best apologies on film ever, and leaves.
You told me you couldn't believe in somebody who didn't believe in you. I believed in you. Always believed in you. You just didn't believe in me.
Duckie sends Andy off after Blaine. The two kiss in the parking lot. I could watch these two kiss all day. But also, I agree with Katrina Giltra, who says the following about the film.
Blaine is so boring. I don't understand. They never actually have a conversation. We know he's rich. We know he's kind of feeble and doesn't stand up for himself very well. We know nothing else about him, and he doesn't have any personality beyond being rich. So he's a very unusual love interest in that sense. And I think it really does point to the fact this is a film about Andy, not a film about the couple. So it's a teen movie. I guess it's a romance, but I would never ever call it a romantic comedy.
Pretty in Pink, like many of the high school movies that will come after it for the next 30 years, believes that high school is an extreme microcosm of divisions that happen outside of its four walls. This movie is trying to tell us something true about class divisions in America at large by telling us a story about Andy and her relationships. She is Duckie, who is even poorer than she is, but is saved by a kind of spunkiness. There's Blaine and Steph, showing us that there's a right way and a wrong way to be rich. There's Iona, who leaves her punk sensibilities behind as soon as she gets a guy. And then there's Andy, who gets to have the cultural cachet of being poor, but the work ethic of an upwardly mobile young person who we can get behind. John Hughes isn't creating these archetypes, but he's stamping them onto our DNA. Here is Russell Mafe, professor at the University of Idaho.
So the impact of John Hughes, is particularly on folks of my generation, is absolutely huge, right? In terms of, he really helped popularize and articulate this idea of the teen film in this moment and what it could do. And not that the teen film just had to be some kind of like silly film about romance and love or this or that or about jocks and nerds, but that you could make a teen film that had like very intense, deeply felt emotionality, could have strong performances, could be a serious film by most accounts that just happened to be about teenagers.
A serious film that happens to be about teenagers that also has great making out. I'm Vanessa Zoltan.
I'm Hannah McGregor.
You already sound like, am I today?
I'm Hannah. I think I might be Hannah McGregor. This movie's really thrown me for a loop.
And this is Hot and Bothered.
Okay, oh my God, Vanessa, we have so much to talk about in this movie, but can we start with the fact that it is just like so good to look at?
It is so beautiful, and it makes me wonder why Martin Scorsese now gets all of the cinematography money and why more cinematography, set design, costume design, all of that mise-en-scène stuff doesn't just get thrown at rom-coms where it belongs.
Aesthetically, this movie is such a pleasure.
Yes.
The visual representation of 1980s counterculture is so visually dense and exciting. You spend a lot of time with Andy, Molly Ringwald's characters, like a lot of time with her outfits. It is a major part of her self-expression, and the movie takes that very seriously and really shows you. But she also works at like a cool counterculture record store where the older woman who is the owner, boss, Iona, is wearing like a look in every scene, like a look.
Like multiple wigs involved.
Oh, yeah.
Literally head to toe.
And then Duckie, Andy's best friend. Duckie is my style icon. Like, I watched this movie and I was like, all I want is to dress exactly like Duckie. I'm going to be on the lookout for plaid pants because boy, did those looks work for me. But like, as soon as you start trying to parse through the visual and get at like what's actually happening in this movie, it kind of falls to pieces, huh?
I just want to spend one more second on the visual component of it, though, because there is something to look out at every moment. Like, they go to gym class, and Molly Ringwald has like a piece of pink lace that she has pinned to her gym uniform. Like, they are in gym uniforms. They are supposed to all look the same. And still, I'm like, trying my very best to decode people's personalities by the way that they're wearing their hair, the way that they've either popped their collar or not, and their earrings.
Yeah.
And it feels all incredibly intentional. And I think that I saw this movie for the first time as a teenager, and I think that I spent a lot of my time in high school as a like shy kid in high school trying to decode what cool kids were saying about themselves with their clothes.
Yeah.
And in this movie, it felt like a safe space to practice that skill that I feel like I'm at high school, but in a safe space at high school. I really do.
Yeah. I mean, I went to like American high school movies always for me feel pretty fundamentally unrelated to my high school experience because it's not what high school is like in, I think, anywhere else. So a lot of the stuff doesn't read to me as anything like what going to high school was like. It's like what American movies about high school are like. And I can certainly see how like a lot of the recurring tropes of the high school movie are getting worked out in this, right? Like the fixation on prom as a extremely important rite of passage that you need to go to, even if none of your friends are going to be there and you don't care about it at all. Like that idea, but also the like, here are the different cliques and here's where they hang out and here's what they look like. And like a lot of that stuff. And, you know, the idea of the romance of like people from two different cliques having almost like a Romeo and Juliet kind of stakes to it. All of which for me as an adult, you know, feels like pretty silly and pretty low stakes.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, within the logic of the high school movie as a genre is like nothing could matter more than who you go to prom with.
Yeah.
I gotta say, as somebody on the right side of 40, my memories of prom are foggy and insignificant.
I agree with everything you said, except that what matters most to Andy is who she goes to the prom with. I think she's really wrestling with exactly this idea, right?
Yeah.
Is prom stupid? But if I don't go, am I just not going because I'm poor and like kind of ashamed and can't afford a nice dress?
Yeah.
And then this beautiful boy asks her out and it gives her this golden ticket to prom. And then she has this line that Molly Ringwald says that women go up to her on the street and still say to her, which is, I just don't want them to think that they beat me.
Mm.
And like that's what going to prom signifies for Andy in this movie. And so I think that it's like a confirmation of prom as important experience. Like there's a great speech, Annie Potts, Iona, Molly Ringwald, sort of like best friend who's older than
mentor
her.
kind of character.
Yeah. She gives this great speech about prom where she's like, I knew a woman who she has a great life. She's a great husband. She's a great house. And every once in a while, she feels like something is missing from her life. And then she remembers that she didn't go to prom.
Is that a great speech or is it a bonkers speech?
It's great because I think we're supposed to think like, obviously, prom doesn't flip and matter.
I don't know if the movie is arguing that. I think you know that. But I think this movie structurally is like prom matters. If you don't go to prom, you will regret it.
I really don't. I think this movie thinks prom is ridiculous. If you don't go because you don't want to go, that's not only fine, but like there's something like punk about that. But if you don't go because you've been shamed into not going, that's different. That is qualitatively different. And that, right, like essentially you're being class bullied into not going, that's different.
Yes, absolutely. I think if we saw any characters not going to prom and being happy with that decision, it would be a more convincing argument, but we don't.
Sure.
Everybody has to go to prom because prom is where the climax of the movie happens, as per the nature of the genre.
Okay, so Hannah, what does this movie believe about love?
What a confusing, hard to answer question, Vanessa. This is, of the movies we have discussed thus far, this is the one I had the hardest time answering this question for. And I think that a big part of my confusion came from the bait and switch ending. As you have referenced already, the original ending of this movie had Andy and Duckie ending up together, and test audiences booed when that happened.
Honestly, when I read about it, I boo.
And so they went back and refilmed the ending with Andy ending up with Blaine. And so I feel like the fact that the whole rest of the movie stayed intact, but the person who she ends up with switches really gets at the way the movie doesn't have a clear sense of like what love is or what a good relationship is or who you ought to be with. If like this sort of best friend of hers who is like also working class, also counterculture, they've grown up together, he's obsessed with her, she's only ever seen him as a friend, but like that's the real place where love comes from. Like they've got so much in common, their values are much more aligned, ultimately they're the right pair. Like that would say something about love that I think is part of why they redid the ending, because I think that what that would say about love is like kind of a stick to your own kind vibe. But the ending where she ends up with Blaine then becomes like, well, he hasn't treated her very well, and we kind of haven't gotten to see them together all that much. So the closest I can come to a thesis about what this movie thinks about love is that it is like profoundly constrained by things that are out of our control. By our socioeconomic status, by our class, by the unpredictable and uncontrollable behavior of other people. Andy's mom abandoning the family and her dad being like, sometimes you can love somebody and they don't love you back and there's nothing you can do about that. What do you think?
No, I think that that's such an important series of points that the movie isn't making a coherent argument because focus groups changed the ending. And so this movie is like half music video, half French Nouveau film. The French Nouveau part to me is almost accidental. It's just so absurd, the logic of it. Like the fact that Andrew Dice Clay is playing Andrew Dice Clay, but is also playing a bouncer in the suburbs of Chicago.
Yeah.
It is very confused in a way that I love. But I think that the text that we have in front of us, the things that I can map that it believes about love is one, just that like you're attracted to who you're attracted to. And when you're super attracted to someone and they are attracted back to you, that feels like one of the great highs. And that like you can essentially not know each other. And like if the kissing is good and you both are only into each other.
Yeah. And the kissing is good.
The kissing is so good.
He has strong lips, as Iona says.
Yes. And sometimes I get confused when people talk about chemistry on screen. I'm like, I don't know what that means. And then these two on screen, I'm like, I know what it means. It means I actively want them to have sex. I don't necessarily want to watch it, but I do. I want them to do. I'm like, please go have sex. It would be good for the world if you did. And so I do think that this movie like really believes that mutual attraction is just like a very special thing and that good kissing is intoxicating. And therefore, with the ending we're given, you know, where Duckie and Andy don't end up together, someone can be your best friend and you can have everything in common with them. 99.999% of the things can be right. And if the attraction isn't mutual, then that's it. It's not a good relationship.
Yeah. So the attraction becomes a necessary but not sufficient condition of romantic love. Like, you got nothing without it. You have to have that, like, draw towards one another. But no matter how good it is, it's not worth sacrificing your pride or sense of self for, even if the kisses are good.
Right. And whenever I feel like I need to excuse myself for loving this movie so much, which is every time I watch this movie, the line comes up when Andy and Blaine are making out at the country club in front of some horses on some hay. And it must smell amazing. And what a romantic place to make out.
No, it smells like hay. Hay smells delicious.
Okay. Anyway, they are making out and Andy says, if someone doesn't believe in me, then I can't believe in them. And then when he gets her back, right, part of what he says, and we'll talk more about this next week, but part of what he says is, I believe in you. I always believed in you. Yeah, so attraction plus believing in someone and rooting for someone, I think that this movie is saying, like, that'll do a lot. I don't think we're supposed to believe these two end up together, you know?
No, it is, you know, part of the nature of the high school romance is that you always have to be like, and they are children. Yeah. They are so young. And like the stakes are different than in adult rom-coms where either the subtext or the text is these people are going to get married and spend their entire lives together. Like, we're not being served that at the end of this movie. We're just being told, like, probably she is gonna get to bone this cute preppy, and that's just gonna be nice for everybody involved. Hopefully.
And hopefully she's gonna get to tell a story about herself for the rest of her life, that there are good guys out there who are willing to stand up to their friends for you. I don't know, like these relationships can be formative in really loving ways or really destructive ways. And part of the movie is about Andy being like, even if you're a jerk, I'm not going to let this be destructive. But I love that Blaine is like, I also don't want to let it be destructive.
Yeah, and one of the other things that this movie clearly believes about love is that it can be profoundly destructive because Andy's being raised by a single father who is an absolute mess because her mother walked out 3 years ago and he just has not recovered from that. Yeah. Like he just, lies in bed all day, doesn't work, doesn't do anything. So she's this like self-sufficient, hyper-parentified teenager and is seeing up close and personal how an unequal relationship in which one person wants it more than the other person does can really ruin your life. Kind of if you let it, quote unquote. And I want to come back to the if you let it when we talk about class, because I want to talk about what this movie has to say about bootstraps. But I do think it's really important that like that's what she has seen. She has seen love ruining people's lives. And I think she's received as a message that she's also unlovable. Because like, guess what? A parent abandoning you is like pretty devastating.
Yeah.
We don't get to see a lot of that, of her devastation, but it's there in the way that she tries to make her dad get a job.
Yeah. I also just think that Duckie and Andy's relationship is not of like two equals who make each other feel loved. So
Yeah. I mean, when we're talking about what this movie believes about love, there's also like something about what this movie believes about friendship as well. And Andy and Duckie's friendship is very confusing to me because it's a half an hour. I checked the timestamp. It's like 29 minutes into the movie before there's a scene where she shows any affection towards Duckie. Up to then, he seems like a guy who is sexually harassing her, who she tolerates, possibly because she's afraid he'll become dangerous if she doesn't. He sexually harasses her in school right in the very first scene, and then he turns around and sexually harasses two other girls, and then he's like hassling her at the club, lying about the relationship status to the bouncer.
Stalking
her, like propositioning her, asks her to give him a drive home, and then it's like, can I put my head in your lap? Like, his behavior is disgusting, and she seems like merely tolerant of it right up until that scene when they're studying together in her bedroom, and she's like, oh, I love you, you matter so much to me. And I'm like, what? Sorry, what?
Which is why, again, we'll talk more about the bait and switch of the ending, but it's why I would not want to watch Duckie and Andy get together. He is so disgusting for the first 30 minutes of this movie. People are complicated and whatever, but the way that he treats her, he shows up at her workplace and pulls the fire alarm and makes a scene.
Multiple times.
Yeah. And he's just messing with her life, with her job, with her love life in like very high stakes ways that I genuinely find irredeemable. I know that Duckie is a queer icon. I hate Duckie and find him irredeemable.
Ooh, okay. All right. I want to talk about Duckie more, but I'm wondering if it's time for us to segue then into the subtext, what this movie is saying about love, because I think a lot of the complication of Duckie is his queerness / non-queerness / how John Hughes attempts to write a gay best friend.
Right. So apparently Molly Ringwald fed John Hughes, this character of Duckie, based on her best friend at the time, who is a gay man. And John Hughes just like kind of wrote it down word for word and was like, the only difference will be that I'll make Duckie straight. As if like that is the same as eye color in terms of what it does to power dynamics and how people interact with one another. And it's just not. A gay best friend in a consensual way making a flirtatious joke with you where you know that there is like absolutely no threat to it is very different when someone is straight. And so this "except he's straight" thing changes everything. It changes everything. And I hate it.
Yeah, it changes everything about the relationship because he becomes he is, you know, watching this movie as a woman, he feels like a threat. He feels like dangerous.
A threat. Yes. He goes and talks to her dad.
Unhinged behavior. And like leaves her like 10 messages every night and bikes past her house 20 times a day.
100 times a day. He says 100 times.
Stalker behavior. But what interests me is what John Hughes has done textually to turn the gay best friend into a straight man. And what he has done is make him a predator, which I don't think that is a conscious commentary on masculinity on Hughes's part. I don't think he's that smart a screenwriter. What I think is that is like the code for heterosexual masculinity is threat. And so that attempt to fit him into the movie's sort of logic, like its heteronormative logics, is so agonizing to watch that when we were reading against the grain of the film, it almost exposes the way that compulsory heterosexuality is deeply toxic. Because it's literally taken this like so clearly a queer character and shoved them into this framework. And this framework is like so built on violence.
Yeah. Shorthand is he would assault her. I love that reading.
Yeah, you know, and it's interesting to see, you know, one of the through lines in this movie that I would like to unpack a little bit more is its emphasis on making even rejected romantic partners desirable by showing somebody else wanting them. We've got to sort of quote unquote redeem Duckie through he kisses Iona at one point.
With no consent.
With absolutely no consent. But Iona makes a point of being like, it was a great kiss. What did she say? It made her thighs tremble. And then in the final scene, we get the little sort of Christy Swanson cameo where she ogles Duckie. And we're supposed to be like, desirable people would also desire Duckie. And that is important for the like legibility of these characters is to see them being objects of desire.
Yeah.
Okay, you know what? Actually, I'm already drifting in this direction, so I'm going to hit the emergency stop button real quick and talk about desirability politics.
It doesn't need to be quick. Do it.
Okay, so the concept of desirability politics is something that I first encountered in the writing of Kai-Cheng Tom. She is a trans woman of color, novelist, nonfiction writer, absolutely wonderful writer and thinker. Strong recommend to follow her on Instagram because she is really brilliant. And she writes a advice column for Extra, the queer magazine. And in one of her advice columns, she's talking to the letter writer about their discomfort. The letter writer is an older lesbian, and they're talking about their discomfort with the idea of dating a trans woman. And, you know, Kai-Cheng Tom is helping them unpack this. And she introduces the idea of what she calls desirability politics. So I'm going to quote from her here. She writes, "The struggle of people who are classified as unfuckable," pardon the swears in our mostly swear-free podcast, "by the dominant culture, or whose desires lie outside the borders of the dominant culture, to be recognized as erotic beings with erotic worth and agency. That's what desirability politics are. And to demonstrate the way that desirability intersects with structures of power, she draws on the work of radical feminist scholar Gail S. Rubin, who came up with the concept of the charmed circle of sexuality, which is literally a little graph that's like, here at the center is the most socially sanctioned form of sexuality / desire, which is white heterosexual sex between married partners who are cisgender people. That's like right at the center. That's the like best kind of sex. And then sex with trans people is at the furthest edge of the charmed circle. And the thing that that Kai-Cheng is getting at in this is that desirability is simultaneously fully a social construct and, like other social constructs such as race, has real lived material implications and can have a lot to do, the degree to which you are perceived as desirable, particularly for women, has a lot to do with how livable your life is going to be and how safe your life is going to be. And I think that this movie has a lot to say about desirability politics and their relationship both to heterosexuality and to class.
Okay, Professor McGregor, because I have just like a private lesson with you right now. Where does like incel politics overlap with desirability politics?
Yeah, so incel, which is a portmanteau of involuntarily celibate, for those who have had the blessing of not encountering this subculture, it's a very violent and misogynist subculture of predominantly white men online who are railing against desirability politics and the way in which those politics have rendered them less than. And so, it's this sense that they don't have the sexual capital that other men do, and as a result, they are rejected, and that they, deserve to be recompensed in some way. Yeah. So the interesting thing about incel culture is that, like a lot of forms of right-wing extremism, it begins with a recognition of a real problem and then follows that in the most white supremacist, misogynist, patriarchal, capitalist direction possible. So these are like men who have recognized that desirability politics are at work, but who are like, well, that's outrageous because I am a straight white man. I should get everything I want. And women are objects for me to acquire. And I am being oppressed by the fact that I am not being handed the women that I believe I get to own by virtue of being a man. Right?
Yeah,
so it's like the same way that like anti-vaxxers are like, some of their critiques of the mainstream medical system are fully legitimate. They've just followed those critiques down a trail that is neither evidence-based nor social justice oriented. So, when we think about desirability politics, one of the things that it helps to expose for us is the way that within heteronormative structures, cultures, texts, like a lot of these movies, women are positioned continuously as objects to acquire whose value is in part determined by the degree to which other men also recognize that they are valuable. And that is so explicit in this movie. Yeah. Like, Blaine is really drawn to Andy, but he is put off when Steph, his nightmare best friend, lies and says that Andy is valueless. Mm-hmm. And Blaine's like, oh, but don't you think there's kind of like something there? And Steph's like, no, there is nothing there. And what is important for the logic of the movie is that Steph is lying.
Right.
Steph has been hitting on Andy.
For years, it seems
for
like.
Years.
Right? Like, there's a scene between Steph and Andy where Steph approaches her And, you know, he's like, we're about to graduate. I've been wanting to have sex with you for years. Just admit that it's time. And Andy is like, no, you're disgusting. And is like really verbal and articulate in why she will not want to have sex with him. And so I love this point that like the arc of the movie is Blaine realizing that Steph wanted to have sex with her all along.
Yeah, 100%. And it is really key to his like recognition of her as somebody he can be with, is not that he recognizes that she has value in and of herself, or not only that, but also that he recognizes that his friend has been lying to him and that actually she is more widely perceived as desirable. That he was right. She does have something. That's something to her. And that something is that she is a conventionally attractive, thin, white, cis woman.
She's not totally stereotypically beautiful, which is why we can all think that it's edgy of us to find her beautiful.
Yeah. But she's the like quarter step to the left of stereotypically beautiful that Hollywood movies can cast as quirky looking. And, you know, the other thing that sets her apart, of course, is that she is like punky.
Yeah. So that is the big subtext of the movie to me, is that all poor people are countercultural. Like just their poverty somehow like makes them want to be punk. And that it's like mainstream to be rich and countercultural to not be rich. And there's just this like tiny moment where Andy's dad doesn't have full-time work. They clearly are financially stretched. But like also she is spending $15 on a pair of shoes for fun, for an outfit. This is not extreme poverty. There's enough food in the house. And then we see Duckie for 1 second, and he is sleeping in a mattress on the floor with like graffiti around him. And a different level of poverty is expressed in that moment. And with the two sort of classes at this school being like indoor Republicans in linen suits, outdoor liberals, punks with mohawks and multiple piercings, it is just equating a lot of things.
Yeah.
Apparently, no rich people liked punk music, according to this movie.
All rich people are preppies. All poor people are punks. No poor people
like Lionel Richie
have ever liked Lionel Richie. This movie's take on class is one of its many bonkers traits. So maybe let's get into our theme. Talk a little bit more about cross-class romance.
Yeah. So here's my theory on what this movie thinks about cross-class love. First of all, one of the things I like about this movie is that it actually gives dollar amounts to things. I find that like oftentimes in movies, it's like, that's expensive. And I want to be like, how expensive? I have no idea. And in this movie, they like show you that a prom dress is $600 at like the department store where Molly Ringwald's classmates are just shopping frivolously.
Yeah.
To be clear, I have never spent $600 on a dress in today's money. So in 1987 money, like that is wild. But it, like the rest of the film, has a weird logic to it where there is like some real materiality to how class impacts love. Like they hang out in different spaces. They live in different neighborhoods. She can't afford to do some of the things that he might want them to do, right? Like she can't belong to his country club. And then also that it's immaterial, that like he's one of the good ones, Hannah. They're good rich people too. And to some extent, I agree with that. Class is both material and immaterial. We are just humans. We can just love each other. And like, I'm not allowed into certain spaces where people in different classes are allowed and vice versa. And yet, again, it's just so black and white. There's just such a dividing line between like, it super matters up until this point, and then they can just have a heart of gold.
Yeah. I was so confused when I finished this movie because of that sort of divide, right? Where on the one hand, the characters we are meant to identify with are the working class characters and their punk countercultural aesthetics, right? They are the ones we spend more time with. They are our heroes. They are the ones whose music is the soundtrack of the movie as a whole. They are the ones whose clothing we linger on. We don't spend time with the preppy clothing, admiring it. We don't spend time in their wealthy homes, admiring their wealthy homes. Like the closest we come to that is Andy driving through a rich neighborhood and admiring the house from the outside. Like, isn't it beautiful? I bet the people who live there don't appreciate how beautiful it is. And then that is confirmed when Steph's like, I like destroying my parents' fancy house. That proves I don't care about money. Wrong, Steph. It does not prove that. It proves that you are rich and that has made you self-centered. So we spend all this time with the countercultural characters, but then we're also meant to understand that being rich is morally neutral.
Yeah.
And Andy seems to believe in something akin to reverse racism for rich people. She's got a line where she says, like, if I dismiss Blaine just because he's rich, isn't that as bad as them dismissing us because we're poor? And I'm like, no, Andy, it's not. That's not how power operates. So the movie somehow wants rich and poor to just be two different cultures. And like, they both have their biases against each other. He doesn't fit in with her punk friends. She doesn't fit in with his preppy friends. This is an equal exchange. At one point, Blaine tells her that he has as much to lose as she does.
Yeah.
Which is like, sorry, what? So that's the immaterial part, right? Is that it wants wealth to be not about power, but just about culture. And it's just about cultural difference. And we need to learn to overcome our cultural differences.
They just need to ride the same bus together and then they'll become friends.
Yeah, right? Like there's this really weird way that wealth is treated as being similar to race, like essentialized in a similar way, except that Andy very obviously feels bad about being poor.
Yes. And gives like a pretty damning speech about the education system.
Yep.
She gets called into the principal's office for standing up for one of her friends. And the principal is like, Andy, you have worked this system. Like, you are about to graduate with honors. You'll probably get a scholarship to a good school. Like, just keep your head down and keep doing good work. And he says to her, like, you're getting a really good education here. And she calls him out on it. And she's like, that I don't deserve because I'm from the wrong side of the tracks. Like, are you saying that because I'm poor, I don't deserve an education? And I'm like, watch out, Andy. You might be making a valid point about class.
100%.
So, like, she understands it sometimes.
Yeah. So I think an interesting addition to that rant that Andy goes on about her right to an equal education, I want to read that alongside her relationship with her dad and the sense that a big part of their poverty is that her dad isn't trying hard enough.
Yeah.
And Andy's speech to him is like, suck it up, get over it. She's not coming back. You have to stop living like this. Which for me, that feels very pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. And Iona, her like cool countercultural mentor, as soon as she gets a romantic partner who's like got a stable job, she's like, cool, I'm going to transform everything about myself for this man who has money. And that is going to be my happy ending.
I
love Terrence. When Andy shows up, Terrence treats her exactly the way an adult man should when meeting the teenage friend of his date.
Yes.
It is respectful and not creepy. Good job, Terrence.
He also, when Andy is like the pet shop owner, and he's like, among other things, I'm like, oh, Terrence, you just have to say that you have other holdings. You can't help it. Like, that's part of your outfit, is like, I have a complex portfolio, actually.
Look at my suit. I own businesses.
Yeah. Okay, Hannah, you should watch this movie if.
Oh, if you need inspiration for how to effectively layer vests. If you're in your vest era.
A lace vest. Who knew?
Not me. Let's all go out and get lace vests.
They're so beautiful.
Oh, Vanessa, you should watch this movie if.
You find the politics being conveyed by earrings endlessly fascinating.
The accessory game.
But like, somebody wrote this thesis and I want to read it.
Okay, well, send us your thesis about earrings.
About costuming in Pretty in Pink, please. Next week, Hannah, we're going to talk about this final scene. This like, Kate from Kate and Leopold had a focus group put together this scene. And so we have some cross movie stuff happening here, which I'm really excited about. So in our Meg Ryan miniseries, we ended up talking about sort of this directorial and writer-auteur of Nora Ephron. And we're not going to be able to spend that time in the Cross-Class Love miniseries giving that same attention to John Hughes, who, like Nora Ephron, made 3 movies with Meg Ryan. John Hughes made 3 romance plot movies with Molly Ringwald. And he had a huge cultural impact on teen films, on the way that we think about 80s films. So we're going to get Dr. Holly Chard on the phone. Holly has her PhD in film studies, and she is the author of the book Mainstream Maverick, John Hughes and New Hollywood Cinema. Let's get Holly on the phone. Hi, Holly.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm great, thanks.
So Hughes, as you know, was not hugely popular with critics in the way that he was popular with audiences. I'm wondering if you can tell us why you think that was and how our cultural understanding of him has changed over the last 40 years.
Yeah, wow, 40 years it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think one of the really crucial things to understand is that for such a long time, who were film critics? They were mostly male, they were mostly white, pretty educated, middle-aged. They were not the audience for these movies. Yeah. They were not the audience for lots of movies, to be honest with you. And it's interesting as a kind of film historian more generally, when you look back at some of the movies that were really successful with audiences, did really well at the box office, but got terrible reviews. And, you know, some of that is to do with broader ideas of like, what is a good movie? But quite a lot of it is like, who are the movies for? So I think part of the change is how kind of modern feminists view rom-coms, chick flicks. I was actually at another talk with Karina Antrobus, who's just done the book I'm a Feminist and I Love Rom-Coms, which I highly recommend. The rom-coms and chick flicks are one of the few spaces in movies where women's stories are told, and particularly young women's stories are told. And I think that is what a lot of people are now kind of realizing. And I think also it's valid to like these movies. I feel like even when I started my PhD, probably throughout my PhD, people were like, these movies are garbage. You're doing a PhD in film studies. Basically, like, how dare you write about these films? And actually, by the time I finished, and obviously by that point, John Hughes had sadly passed away. You'd had the big like Oscars tribute and kind of people reappraising his work. And suddenly people were like, actually, there's something very interesting going on in these movies. There's kind of layers there. And as I talk about in my book, you know, that doesn't mean to say there's not some very dubious things around consent, around sexism, around racism, but there's still a kind of space, particularly for young women's stories, that just didn't exist, to the same extent before.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I was born in 82, so these were the movies that really raised me. Okay, so as you know, in 2018, Molly Ringwald wrote a big article in The New Yorker about John Hughes and John Hughes in the context of the Me Too movement. I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about his politics, both in person and in his films, and potentially his National Lampoon writing.
Sure. Okay, so I think I kind of sit in the camp of the art and the artists aren't quite the same thing.
Sure.
Partly because Hollywood is collaborative, and something that is a bit tricky with the kind of work that I've done is like you're kind of going, well, this is the main guy I'm talking about. But actually film is hugely collaborative. There's lots of different elements. So I think we have to remember that. But I think in terms of his politics, who he voted for and who he donated to, I looked up that data and generally supported Republican candidates, but donated to Obama because he was a candidate from Chicago.
Chicago above fiscal conservatism.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. And that was obviously later in his life as well. But I think it's fair to say he is very much a baby boomer. He was part of National Lampoon. He was very much part of that culture of a very kind of masculine, quite juvenile sense of humor. Some of the National Lampoon stuff, I've got a whole folder of it, and I think one day I would like to do something with it. But a lot of it would be an understatement to say it's problematic. There's
it's
kind of
so
stuff
gross.
About rape and like making light of like sexual assault. And obviously like Lampoon at the time also just always has all these pictures of women with their breasts out. It's really locker room. Having said that, like some of it is interesting from the point of view where you can see themes coming through that do end up finding their way in a much more palatable fashion in his kind of movies. So the kind of obsession with Americana, of that kind of like 1950s post-war suburbia, of kind of families, the piece he did, Vacation 58, which is the basis for National Lampoon's Vacation, kind of is all just basically about how like suburban middle-class American life is really disappointing. And I think you see some of those threads starting right there. But yeah, that stuff was quite iffy. Then it's interesting that, say, he uses National Lampoon as his kind of leverage, right, into getting into movies. And then, as I say, he kind of turned to teen films because he thought they'd be really cheap to make. And that you don't have to pay the cast very much. You can shoot like on location in the Midwest somewhere because you don't have to put them up in like, Hollywood or wherever. And that you can kind of do these, so Breakfast Club is kind of a chamber piece, right? It's just like a bunch of people in a room talking, your kind of 12 Angry Men type scenario. Yeah. So originally that was the movie he was going to make first. And then he ended up making 16 Candles, Molly Ringwald, that kind of relationship built. And that was then, I think, where you see this shift to thinking a little bit more about female characters and thinking about, okay, what kinds of stories haven't really been told? I mean, these are still super white, super middle class stories, but still, obviously there have been stories about young people in Hollywood movies since silent cinema. But in terms of kind of giving them a subjectivity and like kind of understanding of teen angst in the way that he does, I think is why a lot of people hold him in such high esteem now. A lot of people remember those movies as well as being really like influential when they were growing up.
Yeah, whenever people say that he invented the teen movie, I'm like, what about Rebel Without a Cause and American Graffiti? But it does seem like he was just, right, like George Lucas then switched to something else, whereas Hughes stayed in the high school landscape.
Yeah, I think, there's a great book by, I'm going to get this wrong, I think Catherine Driscoll. She's written a book on teen film, and she traces it back to, like, Clara Bow as the it girl in the silent era. And there's those films from all that way back that are about, young women and young people. And as you say, the 50s in terms of particularly masculinity, kind of Marlon Brando, James Dean, often through a lens of like kind of Freudian angst, was very much like just on trend for the time. And I think obviously tapping into that like pop culture zeitgeist of the 1950s. And then, it kind of goes out of fashion, but you have American International Pictures, Roger Corman, you know, those kind of like schlocky drive-in movies. And then, you say you have like American Graffiti, Grease, arguably, as well.
Mm-hmm.
Although, like, I mean, hilariously, the teenagers in Grease are all like 30.
Whereas Molly Ringwald is legitimately a child making these movies.
Which, again, like, in reviews and conversations at the time around like Hughes's films, one of the things they said was like, compared to something like Grease or Porky's, like they're actual teenagers with like, you know, you've got Anthony Michael Hall with his orthodontics and his weird hair and like his just like acne and stuff, and seems at that point like much more authentic. And I think obviously we've come on such a journey since then in terms of what we think of as authenticity and as kind of what shows us that the lives of teenagers, and it, thankfully it's become much more diverse. But really kind of a breakthrough in terms of we're going to make movies about teenage stories with actual teenagers, or at least kind of vaguely convincing people in their 20s.
Right. So you've written about how the thematic and stylistic continuities between Hughes's films were a deliberate marketing technique. I'm wondering if you can tell us how we see that play out in Pretty in Pink, the sort of third of these Ringwald collaborations.
Absolutely. I mean, firstly, full disclosure, Pretty in Pink is probably my favorite John Hughes film.
Mine too.
Awesome.
It's the best one. It's the best one.
But secondly, it really is like the kind of pinnacle of this approach, where you've got the soundtrack, which it genuinely is like a legit soundtrack. I've had all kinds of people come up to me at conferences and events and just in life and go, oh, that soundtrack, it's so cool. It's got like the Smiths and Echo and the Bunnymen and all of these different artists that are like really kind of cutting edge and you know, not too mainstream, especially in the States. I think one of the things to say about Hughes and his musical taste was it was really Anglophile. And I think definitely British people kind of connect him with the soundtracks perhaps as much as the movies. So you have the soundtrack, you have Molly Ringwald, Andrew McCarthy. The Brat Pack phenomenon's really taking off. And so, really easy to sell, right? You've got pretty people looking fashionable, great soundtrack. MTV is huge. You can create music videos with Molly Ringwald's face like everywhere. So you've got that aspect. And then stylistically, the movie is really tapping into that MTV style. The thing that really, I think, makes the film excellent is the fact that Hughes decided not to direct it himself. And instead, Howard Deutsch is the director, who had experience in like music videos and in like commercials as well. So he really gets that like fluid camera work. You know, there's crane shots, there's dollies, there's all kinds of camera movement. If you watch it side by side with something like The Breakfast Club, which Hughes directed, Breakfast Club is so static.
Yeah.
And a lot of his films are. I think his probably most interesting film visually is Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And that's because Tak Fujimoto is the cinematographer. And had done things like Badlands and stuff. And is just like a really legit DP. Yeah. So Pretty in Pink is like kick-ass soundtrack, pretty people, a solid story that takes you in. And it just looks and goes together really well as well.
And they're so fun to watch kiss. I just love this movie so much. Holly, thank you so much for coming on and talking to me about one of my favorite movies.
I was so excited when you emailed me. I was like, oh, yes.
You've been listening to Hot and Bothered. We are currently in the middle of our Patreon drive. If you're like, finally, someone is talking about how hot Molly Ringwald is, then help make the show sustainable. Last week, Ariana and I released an episode every day of the week on the love interests of the Gilmore Girls. So if you sign up at any tier, you're going to get years of perks and 7 episodes on Gilmore Girls. I'm just saying. Sign up now at patreon.com/hotandbotheredrompod. We are a Not Sorry production. I'm the executive producer. We are edited and produced and lovingly tended to by Ariana Nettleman, and we are distributed by Acast. Thanks as always to our soulmate level patrons who are our heroes and make this podcast possible. Molly Reilly, who we would chase through an airport to declare our love to. Becky Boo, who we would wait for hours on the top of the Empire State Building for. Elizabeth Schweinsberg, whose heart we would play a game of one-on-one basketball for. And Lauren Bayer O'Connell, who we would call up on stage to dance with us in front of the whole summer camp. And our wonderful team, Julia Argy, Nikki Zoltan, AJ Aramas, Courtney Brown, Anissa Ahmed, Danny Langley, and Stephanie Paulsell.